and welcome to the final weekend of Makeready. My name is Tom Eichmans.
And I'm Jamie Yen. Oh, Tom, did you want the screen share back on?
I do, just a moment.
It's Friday. Happy Friday, everybody.
There it is.
Yeah, so we are part of the Seattle Art Book Fair, and we are thrilled to welcome you to the final weekend of Makeready, our very first official program of the Seattle Art Book Fair.
Before we get started, even though this is a virtual event, we'd like to acknowledge that the Seattle Art Book Fair and Makeready are organized on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples, and specifically the Duwamish tribe. We're grateful to and honor these communities, past, present, and future.
The Seattle Art Book Fair was founded in 2019, and we were going to launch in spring 2020, but we've postponed our in-person book fair until 2022. So while we wait for that, we decided to put together Makeready, which is a 3-part virtual program that features artists, designers, printers, and publishers sharing the process of making an art book from start to finish. Each weekend has its own distinct theme: before a book, making a book, and after a book, where we are this weekend. We hope everyone comes away from Makeready with a new perspective on books, printing, and publishing. And we really hope folks connect with other bookmakers and book lovers, and also get inspired to start new publishing projects of their own.
One question we've been hearing a lot is, what exactly is an art book? And there are a lot of answers to this, and none of them are wrong. Art books are a broad category of publications by artists, designers, writers, and makers that reflect on books as a medium and publishing as an artistic practice. Art books often combine content, form, and materials in thoughtful ways that push the possibilities of what books can be. The artists, designers, writers, printers, and publishers all offer different ways to think about what falls under the wide umbrella of art books and what you might see represented at an art book fair. So this weekend is themed after a book. And in addition to tonight's conversation, there are all sorts of sessions tomorrow throughout Saturday, studio visits beginning at 10 a.m. with Push Pull, Mark Wand Editions, and Paperhammer Studios, Partners in Print, Cornish College of the Arts Book Arts program, followed by a workshop with Anemone and Rizzo Geist, or Geist, I'm not sure, followed by office hours at the very end of it all with Knox Gardner.
So Seattle Art Book Fair is 100% volunteer run and organized, and we're powered by Shunpike and supported by For Culture. We also want to thank everyone who donated to us through Give Big, as well as thank our advisors, and especially the Fantastics Short Run Comics and Arts Festival, whose advice and encouragement has been invaluable. Thank you also to Julia Powers and Hart Boyd, who have been our super volunteers, helping us with the technical side of things these past few weekends. And we really can't do events like Makeready or the Seattle Art Book Fair without your support. So if you'd like to donate to ensure we can keep hosting more events like these and make sure, you know, our 2022 book fair is a success, we are happy to receive donations. And we're going to put a link in the chat where you can donate through our fiscal sponsor, Shunpike.
Just a few housekeeping things. The session is being recorded and screen captured. So if you don't want to appear on video or in screenshots, please feel free to turn off your camera or change your display name. Please be respectful of the participants' work and time. Do not record or screenshot any session without notification or their consent. And please mute yourself while you're not speaking. Live captions are available, and they should be available at the bottom of the Zoom menu bar.
So definitely save the date. The Seattle Art Book Fair will return in person next spring, 2022. And if you'd like to be notified and receive a newsletter from us about that, you can sign up for that at our website, seattleartbookfair.org. We promise we don't actually send very many emails, but that will let you know when it's up and running.
We're also super excited to announce a new event following Makeready next weekend, a Seattle Art Book Fair pop-up exhibit and book sale at the gift shop in Chinatown International District right here in Seattle. It's going to feature books, zines, comics, and some fundraiser editions for the fair. And it's next weekend, the 5th and 6th. Check out the gift shop's page for their hours. And they are actually hosting an entire month of book-themed pop-ups each weekend called Pages. Check out their schedule and see who the other great pop-ups are throughout the month.
Today, we have these amazing panelists who are going to talk about the process of how to get a book out into the world. Colleen Louise Barry is an artist and writer. She runs the interdisciplinary publishing projects Mount Analogue and Angel Tears, and was the editor-in-chief of Gramma Press. Her first book of poems, Colleen, is due out from After Hrs this year. Sharon Blake is the CEO of Life Chronicles Publishing and has been a full-time professional writer for 8 years. Her passion for starting her own publishing company flourished because she desired to participate in the healing process of sharing real-life stories. Sharon knows firsthand that writing supports a healthy thought life, and this is why she's passionate about writing and publishing all genres of books. Hannah Pierce is the director of Small Editions, a book studio and artist book publishing house. Since 2012, Small Editions has collaborated with over 20 contemporary artists to publish book works and artist books that unite interdisciplinary practices with book arts. Paul Shortt, who is our moderator this evening, has participated in over 80 group and solo exhibitions, both nationally and internationally. He has participated in the Printed Matter art book fairs in New York and Los Angeles, in addition to art book fairs in Vienna, Austria, Detroit, Kansas City, Cincinnati, and Baltimore. His artist books are in the collections of the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of Art, and the Robert B. Haas Arts Library and Yale University. Paul is currently based in Gainesville, Florida. Thank you both to Hannah and Paul for being here late in the evening on East Coast time. And Paul, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me host and moderate this panel. I'm really excited to see what the presenters do. I want to personally thank Tom and Jamie for inviting me to do this. I'm really excited to learn about the practices of the three presenters today and their different approaches in what you do after a book and how you kind of get it out into the world. A little about me, I've been making art books and zines for about a decade. In that time, I've created over 25 books that run the gamut of zine to artist book, working in multiple printing methods from digitally printed, risograph, laser cut, etc. I've also participated in over 20 art book and zine fairs since I started producing books. So I aggressively started producing books in 2012, kind of towards the end of grad school. And when I moved to Baltimore after graduate school, really into making books, especially when someone introduced me to the risograph. I have to thank Christopher Cardin-Bickus for that. I love art book fairs, and I love talking at art book fairs, and I love selling. I love being behind a table and engaging with people. I love it so much that I actually created a guide on how to do that in 2019. And in attempts to guide you through how to prepare, plan, sell, and build community in art book fair. Because for me, I really kind of came into my own doing the art book fairs and kind of building community, trading a zine with someone, tabling next to someone for 3 days in a row really lets you know if you're going to be friends or not, long term or not. For me, in my early youth, I did mini comics and zines, and I would give them out at raves and parties. But I printed this big edition, and I didn't do anything with them. I got it into one store, and then the box of them sat at my parents' house. Actually, that box is still at my parents' house 20 years later. So my hope is that you come away from this presentation today learning about 3 new bookmakers and publishers, but also that there are multiple ways of getting your books out there, and that they shouldn't be stuck under your bed, that you can start your own online store, you can implement zine and art book fairs, you can try to find distributors, you can set up shop on the side of a street. Just get your work out there. That's my hope from everyone who's watching this today. I'm going to get quiet now and switch over to, maybe we'll start with Colleen. Do you want to do a little talk about what you do?
Yes, thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you to Jamie and Tom. I was just saying earlier how wonderful it's been to watch this happen over the past 3 weeks. If you guys don't know, all the videos from the other panels and studio visits and everything are all archived online, and I've just been going through those, and it's just like a little treasure. So thank you so much. Okay, I'm gonna attempt to share my screen. God help us all. Okay, desktop. Okay, everyone can see that, right? Give me a thumbs up. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I'm Colleen. Like it was said before, I'm an artist and a writer. You know, I also teach and run a couple sort of interdisciplinary publishing projects. Really though, I was thinking about it as I was getting ready for the panel today, and I realized actually I've worked in publishing in some capacity for my entire adult life. So right after college, I moved to New York, and I actually worked at Random House. I was a publishing assistant for their mass market imprint, Valentine Bantam Dell. And that was really fascinating. And then directly from that experience, I went to graduate school and got an MFA in poetry, and sort of worked at and was involved in more academic literary press world. And then from there came to Seattle and really got involved in, you know, DIY publishing, zine community, way more like community-based kind of independent publishing. So I've really worked in sort of what I see as the 3 categories of different publishing houses. You know, you have your big 3, Random House, it's Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, it's more corporate. And then you have your sort of academic university presses, legacy literary presses like Copper Canyon, you know, they're privately funded, Wave Books, Grey Wolf, things like that. And then sort of the 3rd category for me is, you know, more independent, project-based, interdisciplinary DIY publishing. So the reason that I think that's cool and important to bring up is because what I see as the most distinctive difference between those 3 categories, beyond how the books look or what the content is actually their approach to what happens after the book, because it really says a lot about you as a publishing project, press, you know, publishing house, and your philosophy about what books do outside in the wider world and in communities, when you look at how you treat sort of this phase of the book, the after the book. So I feel like I've like run the gamut. But I've been living in the 3rd category, which is my personal favorite, for a few years now. And that sort of started with this project, Mount Analogue. So in 2016, I moved to Seattle directly from grad school and was like ready to go. I came here and I wanted to do just so many different projects with a bunch of artists that I loved and people that I cared about. And all of the projects, you know, they sort of crossed in the middle of printed matter, but also did a ton of different things. So I wanted to work with installation artists and performance artists and put on events and things like that. So Mount Analogue became this catch-all interdisciplinary publishing project. In 2017, we got a physical space in Pioneer Square, and that was next to Cold Cube Press, who, you know, Aidan Fitzgerald was the first person I emailed when I moved to Seattle about making books. I learned so much from them, and they're amazing. They did a studio visit last week, I think. So shout out to them. And then up the street from us was Party Hat Gallery, which Marianne Carter and H. McCall ran, and that was its own version of making editioned art accessible to everyone in Seattle. So we sort of had this like community of like-minded artists and galleries in this space, and it was really, really fun. And that was a really expansive time, not only for Mount Analogue, but I think just like for me as a person. But so Mount Analogue a ton was going on there. We did these monthly installations, and we would try to publish books that went with the installations. We were also publishing series and edition books that had nothing to do with the installation. So it was kind of a publishing studio. It was also a small press bookshop, which is this picture up here in the corner. And it was a community space. So if people had a reading, or they wanted to do a book launch, or they wanted to do a drag performance, whatever it was, the space was available to them as a community resource. So in this picture, you can see down in the corner, we had a show with Tara Booth, which we published a like comics journal with. Aidan Fitzgerald did a show, and you can see his 3 books, Rizzo books that he printed of his own work were there. Melissa Kagerer, Ben Marcus, who runs Goodbye Press. There's just a lot of good stuff going on in terms of taking book makers and putting them in different contexts. And then, oh, I don't know how to there, okay. So these are some of the books that we published. We're still publishing. So when the space closed in 2019, 2018, I can't remember. We continued to publish books without the space. I just had this desire to bring it back down to like a really basic thing with publishing. So we've been doing this political pamphlet series, volume 2, which this Priscilla picture in the middle is the cover of our newest one. That series is just roughly once a month for about a year. So from last September to this coming September, we're publishing a zine weird book object with someone who's doing work in the political world, in the political sphere, who's an activist, or who's working on some kind of creative solution to some larger problem in society. So that's what those 2 books in the middle are. Final Rose is the first book that we ever did with this poet, Haley Fee-Herides. It actually is all of the screenshots that she took while watching The Bachelor, and we sort of reordered them into like a photo essay thing, comic about love and money. And then, you know, these other books all sort of went with installations. Yeah, so, and we have a lot of books planned for this coming year, so fingers crossed everything goes according to plan. So after, I guess, okay, so also while Mount Analogue was happening, I inherited a category 2 press. It was sort of a literary, privately funded, really exciting poetry press in Seattle called Gramma. And I ran that with Aidan Fitzgerald and Michael Heck. The Cold Cube Boys did our book design. And we just did our best with that while Cold Cube and Mount Analogue were also going on. So there was a lot happening. So when Gramma closed and Mount Analogue closed, I was like, I'm taking a break and I'm getting out of Seattle. I moved down to Los Angeles and started working in Hollywood. It was like, I'm done with books. I made props and did like prop shopping for various fashion editorials and like Netflix shows and things like that. At the time, I was living with this woman, Maeve Bowman, who has the most insane VHS collection I think I've ever seen. She's kind of obsessed. So when quarantine hit, I was out of work, she was out of work, and we started obsessively kind of watching these VHS tapes. And so my like newest press project, Angel Tears, was born out of that, because it was really surreal being in Hollywood and feeling like if media is like a spiral, like the things we consume, I felt like I was super tight in the spiral, very close to the middle, like where the farce is born, you know? And that was really fascinating to me, and I wanted to do something with it. So as Maeve and I were watching these movies, we started sending screenshots back and forth to each other, and sort of the idea that we might take those screenshots out of context, mix them together, and sort of be able to hold up this mirror to movies and how movies affect kind of the myth that America tells itself about who it is, which I feel like is actually you know, in some ways way more influential and important than books. That's what the project is. So we actually, these these books that are on the screen here are the first 3 we've ever made, and they're all going to be at that pop-up that was mentioned earlier. I think it's next weekend. So for example, this like big book here, this is called Men Crying, and it's just shots of men crying in movies that were put out on VHS tapes from 1977 to 2006. Similarly, this book, Air Ducts, documents and sort of like chronicles all of the ways that air ducts have shown up, you know, in movies and pop culture, and kind of what escape means and what escapism means. And then here's a collection of Nick Cage thoughts, which Maeve is obsessed with Nick Cage. So Angel Tears, it's funny. I feel like it's kind of a more experimental thing for me. We also do, because of quarantine, this series of e-zines. We just put out one today, and I feel like I want to show it to you guys. So we're going to see if this link works. Oh my God, it does. Okay. So this is our website, and these e-zines we made with web developers on a platform they made for us. And all of the e-zines, there's about 15 of them, I think. They all have different themes. They have different contributors. And we really tried to make them as close to a book as possible. So there's kind of an embarrassing photo of us. But let's see if, there we go. So they include different media like music. My screen is being weird. There we go. And then they include screenshots. This one has an essay from Jasmine, who's a art writer here in Seattle. She writes for The Stranger. And she wrote about the Greg Araki film Nowhere. So they kind of go like this. And they, even though they're online, they have this like very zine feeling to them, where it's kind of just us and our friends saying, here's the weird stuff we consumed during quarantine. You know, we'll put it all together and see what that makes. And it's really fun because these end up including videos as well, which felt like, you know, something new, something different. So that's what I've been up to. That's like a short introduction to what my work in books is. Thank you for listening. Okay, I'm gonna stop my screen share. Okay.
Sharon, would you like to go next? Sharon, did you want to go next?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, I'm Sharon Blake from Life Chronicles Publishing. A little background about our company is I founded it almost 6 years ago as a way to just heal. So I hadn't planned on starting a publishing company, but writing had literally saved my life and saved a lot of my clients' lives. So I just got really inspired to want to write a book one day. And so my very first book that I wrote, I did not publish. I went to an independent publisher, self-publishing company such as we are. And then after that, I really didn't like the process with that publishing company, and as well as just regular traditional publishing company. I wanted it to be a little bit more personal, a little bit more hands-on. Of course, now it's hard to be a little bit more personable, however, because we're growing so much, but however, you know, we really do care about our authors. So we publish books, children's books, novels, memoirs, poetry books, for basically first-time authors. That's what we specialize in, because I was one, and I know how touchy it can be, you know, especially if you're writing a memoir. So I just wanted to have that extra hands-on to help those who are first-time authors with the process of publishing, and, you know, be able to walk through them. So we offer coaching for our first-time authors as well. And we will help. We are a self-publishing company. So if an author wants to have their book their book published, we provide all the services for them, such as editing, book cover design, formatting, getting your ISBN. We do not offer marketing with the exception of on our social media sites, but we help the author get, tongue-tied, help the author get onto Amazon and most online retailers and book distributors. So I love what we do. I mean, I wouldn't have started this company if I didn't have a passion for writing and walking people through the process. It is not an easy process to go to try to publish your book. A lot of authors think, hey, I'm going to hand my book over and we're going to be done and that's it. But no, it takes participation, especially through the editing. And a lot of first-time authors are not aware of that. They really believe that, once you hand it over to the publisher, we're done. And so what does that look like? If someone wants to publish a book through our company, which I will also put a link up here to our website, we ask that you submit your manuscript via email, and there is a place on the page on there to do so. After that, it usually takes 3 to 5 days for us to review it and write up a proposal to do the work to get your book published. After that, the author will have the opportunity to agree to the proposal or not, and then we will go from there. Generally, when an author agrees with the proposal, we will move forward with publishing their book and getting them onto Amazon. What we coach our authors through is the process of getting your book out there and what to do after it's published. So another fallacy I would say authors believe is that I'm going to write a book and I'm just going to be an instant millionaire. I'm just going to make all this money, and they don't really have a following. So in the beginning, as we are going through the proposal process, we're questioning them, what's your social media look like? How many followers do you got? What do you plan on doing with this book? Intention is very important for us to know and for them to understand, so we can help them really get their book going in the direction that they want it to go into. So I always tell our authors, build up your social media, get followers. And how do you do that? So you got to get yourself out there. You got to go to events. We partner and work with Seattle Urban Book Expo with Jeffrey Cheatham. Before COVID, we've been there in the beginning with him through all of his book expos that he's had. And those are very successful and a very good way for a first-time author to get themselves known in the community. We also tell them to go to different bookstores, try to get your book in there in a consignment basis at your local community bookstores. And I was telling one of our authors today that I used to just vend. I would be a vendor at events that weren't book related, just to build my audience and to get to network with other authors. So yeah, we would love to talk with anyone that's willing and wanting to write their book or get their book published. We do have coaches available. If you are wanting to write a book and haven't really put pen to paper yet, we can help out in that arena as well. So we've published in 5 years about 80 books, in 5.5 years. So yeah, I think we know what we're doing.
Great, thank you so much. Let's switch now to Hannah.
Cool. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Tom and Jamie, for the opportunity to speak on here. This is super exciting. I get super geeked about talking about book making, book distribution. And we actually, last year, we published a book called How To Book, which I feel like runs very parallel to the theme of Makeready. And I'll get back towards that publication later. But I think in speaking to folks who are interested in becoming a publisher, what it's like to get your books out there. I think it's kind of interesting to speak to my background, which is honestly all over the place. I was working as an artist, but I ended up getting a degree in business strategy and then worked with arts nonprofits for a few years and had friends across lots and lots of disciplines. And I was really interested in publications in the book form and had taught myself bookbinding and wanted to unite all of these things into one. And so I brought together an interdisciplinary artist journal called Low Key Magazine. And in the process of making that, I knew a lot about bookmaking, but I didn't know anything about printing or distribution. And in learning about that process, I think later on I came back to making How to Book in 2020 to communicate with folks who are interested in going through that process. And at the time I was alone in that process. I didn't know anyone else who worked in publishing until I went to my first book fairs. And through fairs, I forgot cellophane bags for my books, and the people next to me had that or like had different tips for me. And so through building community through book fairs, I think it saved me and further wanted to bring me into bookmaking. So in 2019, while working at an arts nonprofit, I through actually my neighbor across the hall in my apartment building, who was a bookbinder whose studio I used, had the opportunity to take over Small Editions, which was founded in 2012 by Karina Renrolls and Kimberly McClure, who were two recent MFA grads from Cranbrook and who wanted to continue working with a lot of their artist friends. So they established Small Editions and ran exhibitions and publications and took commissioned works. So I have continued on in that tradition. We've moved spaces, and I, as an arts programmer, have had enough exhibitions to last a lifetime. So I'm moving away from that and working more in sort of education and classes with bookmaking. So I'm gonna attempt to share my screen and see how well this goes. Okay. Okay, can we all see a presentation? Fantastic. Okay. Well, it didn't go to the first one, but here we are. So Small Editions is based in occupied Lenape-Hoking, which is also known as Brooklyn, New York, near the Navy Yard. And we are, as Jamie mentioned earlier, an artist book publisher and book art studio. And to that end, we focus on books that elevate the notion of a book to the same level as painting or drawing. And with that, we, to fund our publishing program, we produce books for other people. And in that, we bring the same approach that we would with any of our artist books to making larger runs of books like this. With June Kaneda, who's a photographer, and this was an edition of 1,000 books, and so we manage the production of that book. Anything below that, so something like this, and an edition of 4, we make in studio with the artist. So this set of clamshells and this set of clamshells as well with photogravure prints, we all made in studio. So to speak a little bit to some of our publications, generally we'll work one-on-one with artists over the course of a year. So this one is a book that we worked on for about 1.5 years, which we released at the Printed Matter Art Book Fair in February. And so Ginny came to us after having sort of made a couple mock-ups of this idea of exiting Mormonism. Her family was some of the first people that were converted to Mormonism in Korea. And when she immigrated to the States and grew up in Hawaii and Utah, she had been within the religion until about the age of 30 and then found a way to exit that. And so trying to speak through something that was such an intense experience, we wanted to create a book work that was, created something that was elevated and had sort of a holy, strange experience. And so with that, this book project has a music box with a recorded hymn, and a set of QR codes for an audio listening, and then you're able to flip through these large clamshell boxes. So these are an edition of 12, and they have 2 keys. And the production of this book makes the pricing for this book is $1,800, and that's something that Ginny and I knew that wouldn't, be accessible to most people, but this is something that in thinking about where our book works go, this is something that we market sort of directly to libraries and other collections where it can be accessed by other people. But at the same time, she wanted to have something that her friends and family who were very intimately involved with her story and her experience to have and to hold. And so we developed a zine that is $15. And that's distributed at bookstores around the area in Print and Matter, at Miriam Gallery in New York as well, and online. And to counter that, I think the second book work that we came out with this year, I go back one. Oh, maybe not. There we go. Is Darkroom Drawing by Sam Rogavichus. And Sam and I had worked together at a previous job of mine where I worked on exhibitions of his. And I was really fascinated in a crit group that we were both in of these drawings that he'd made. And so his job was to be a darkroom. He's a darkroom mural printer, essentially. So the image in the center shows a photo enlarger that is essentially the size of an entire room. And so through this practice, Sam would be printing alone in the darkroom for hours and hours and thought of it sort of as a meditative practice. And so we decided to make a book that was sort of an ode to this practice. And we wanted to combine, as 2 people who are printing nerds now, we wanted to combine silver gelatin printing, of which there are 2 in the bottom right-hand corner. There's tipped in silver gelatin print, and risograph printing and laser printing, to kind of speak to his background in skateboarding and zine making. And so that's that work that we come up with. And so that one, as well as based on the construction and the labor of the book, they're all hand sewn, and it took about 2 weeks to sew the entire edition. And because of that, this book is $100. And so again, it's not something that's necessarily directly accessible to most people, but we've sort of marketed it to sort of the higher end artist bookstores in New York. It's also had a really great following when we have shared images on Instagram. And it's, become part of a couple of university collections. And so that's kind of the distribution model for that book. And then, this is going to keep happening. Let's see. How to Book, which I think fits well with what we're talking about today, is a book that we produced. We were planning to produce it before the pandemic started. Then the pandemic started, and everything became virtual submissions from people. And so in this process, I think in making books and wanting to talk about that, we invited 17 different folks who work across artist book publishing to, we sent a targeted set of questions to them based on what their specialties were, and asked for what they thought about how they think about even researching a book project, to how they think about production, and then what they do for distribution. And so through this process, this book has actually been most popularly sold through Instagram and our online shop alone. We had our first edition, which was launched at the Brooklyn Art Book Fair, which was virtual last year. We sold half the edition, and the remaining half of the edition sold out within the next 2 months. And so now it's become, I think, one of those things that we've printed a larger edition, and it's continuing to go into stores and moving into university collections, and it's been picked up at a couple different universities for curriculums. So those are just a few of the most recent projects that we've worked on. Yeah. think I'll escape.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Okay. I'm just going to piggyback off of what you were just talking about before I go into kind of general questions for everyone. You mentioned being in university collections. How did that happen? Was it someone seeing it online and buying it? Was it an outreach that you emailed librarians, be like, hey, this is a book? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, I mean, in the past, luckily, Small Edition sort of has a reputation within library collections. The founder, who's now the executive director at the Center for Book Arts, used to go on library tours across the Midwest. And so she would meet with librarians, bring a whole suitcase of books, say, here's what we're working on. And generally too, when we do our research for making new artist books, when I'm working one-on-one with the artist, we'll access library collections. So when Sam was doing a lot of research for darkroom drawing, he made an appointment at the MoMA library and went through a ton of different photography books to look at the tome of like who had actually spoken to this darkroom practice or what there was existing on that. And a lot of times for previous books that we've made, we've studied Italian tunnel books, kind of crazy stuff like that. There's an artist that we work with named Cheryl Oppenheim, who does a lot of hand marbling. So she does a lot of suminagashi, Japanese marbling, and acrylic marbling. And the Met has an amazing collection of marbled things. And so I think starting that conversation is not just always, reaching out to librarians and saying like, hey, check out all the stuff I've got, which you can do too. And I think they love it where they're like, oh my God, these books are so cool. But I think also having an interest in checking out things within the collection and also knowing, I think getting into a collection, whether it's a private collection or a library collection, I think starts with knowing what is in the collection, and getting to know, if a library has a lot of a certain kind of thing, or they're not really interested in a certain topic that you're working with, or thinking about, how your book might be stored. I know I recently heard that I don't know if it was SAIC, but someone didn't want risograph books anymore because they're like not archival, which was an interesting thing to know. But if you know that sort of thing, not to reach out to that library. But yeah, I think cold reaching out to librarians works too, to say like, hey, I've been working on things. I'm a new publisher. Do you want to check out some of the work I've got? As things that we've done in the past. And even recently, we just had a university buy every single book that's ever been published by Small Editions without talking to them ever. So that was pretty cool. So I think having an online presence, I think especially in the last year, librarians have been checking out book fairs, have been keeping an eye on Instagram, and seeing where things are posted. And I think a lot of the collecting that has been done of our books in the last year has just been online. But
that's great.
Yeah,
I mean, I've been in a few collections myself, but it's always just like someone stopped by my table or someone went on my website. So it's like, I think it's really practical advice of Karina actually going into library collections and meeting the librarians and looking through the collections, not only to create work, but to create connections in community. I kind of wanted to take a step back into, we sent out a kind of like an email prompt with a few questions, and this is for all of you. How do you get your books into stores? And maybe I'll put Sharon on the spot, since she is doing it from a publisher standpoint.
So in order to get your books into like local bookstores, you usually have to reach out to the community liaison. That's especially if your book is self-published through our service. And then they make the decision on whether or not if they want to stock your book in their store. They'll have to look at it, check it out, stuff like that. As far as getting your book into a Barnes and Noble store, that's a bit more of a lengthy process. You'll have to go onto their site and download a form and have that filled out by a publisher who's ever publishing your book, whether that's you or like a self-publisher such as myself. And that's not a quick process. So I just encourage a lot of my authors to check out your local bookstores and go and talk to them, speak to the manager, and more, you know, most of the times they'll pick their books up on consignment.
That's great. With Amazon, is it similar as well?
With Amazon, we would publish their book and get them going on Amazon. We'd upload their book to Amazon, so they'd be online. You'll still, like, when we publish their books, it's going to go to Barnes and Noble online, but it doesn't go into the bookstore. The actual bookstore, they have a totally separate process in which you have to be approved to have your book in that bookstore. But as far as most online distributors, retailers, we will go ahead and do that for you through our company.
Okay. Colleen or Hannah, or Colleen?
Yeah, I just want to jump in on that from also having run the small press bookshop at Mount Analogue and how we got most of our books, and then also doing sort of a more literary, there's a ton of different tiers for distribution. So what Sharon's talking about, sort of reaching out one-on-one to bookstores, is an awesome way to go. And I do that for most of the books I publish. But also there are a lot of small press distributors who will, if you sign on with them as a press that they distribute, they will do that work for you and make sure you're in both bookstores like Elliott Bay, which are independent, and bookstores like Barnes and Noble, which are corporate chains. So there are a lot of options for small press, not a lot, there are some options for small presses in terms of distribution. One of them is SPD, Small Press Distribution. They've recently been having a ton of changes in terms of like how their company is run, and I don't know exactly what's going to happen with them going forward, but they're a staple in the literary publishing community. We use them for Gramma. And then there's also Art Book DAP. So they do specifically art book distribution, and they're an awesome resource, whether you're, you know, looking at what kind of presses you might want to publish your stuff with, how are they distributed? Are they affiliated with any distribution? Or if you're a press yourself and you're like, you know what, distribution is so much busy work. If I am interested in, you know, there are a ton of options. I've also seen, so the press After Hrs that's putting out my book later this fall have a deal with another small poetry publisher called The Song Cave, based in New York. And they actually, After Hrs distributes their book through Song Cave, who distributes their book through 3 or 4 different distribution companies. And those distribution companies all have different market niches that they focus on when they send books to bookstores. So distribution has a lot of tiers, and actually there's a lot of different options for it for small presses that are relatively affordable and take some of that like busy work away. So
Hannah, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, there is also, so one thing with some of the press distributors, so like SPD, which is a rough acronym, is more geared towards like literary, as Colleen mentioned, and then our book DAP. One thing that we run into with a lot of, so with the production books that we make, we will also advise people about where they might do distribution. Distribution is not my favorite thing. So I try to put as little work into it with our own books as possible. But with DAP, I'm trying to remember, you'll have to, a lot of times they won't take something if it's under a run of 500 books, and you'll need to submit it within certain periods of time. So I think thinking about timelines about, you know, if you say like, I'm going to make this giant art book, I'm going to make 2,000 copies of it, and I want it to go everywhere. You'll have to know that that book, you're going to have to make like a dummy copy of that book, or, you know, an advanced copy of like 10 advanced editions to send out that you're never going to get back. to see if a distributor will pick it up. There's also for smaller, a little bit smaller than DAP is Citizen Editions in New York. And they have a really fantastic lineup of artist books as well. I would say it's mostly a lot of photo books, but their selection of books has been really lovely. And then from there, it's kind of going to small shops, which is something I did for a while, but then I kept forgetting to go in after 3 months. They're like, come back in 3 months, we'll let you know how many you sold. And you're like, hey, I'm back. And they're like, not that, you sold one. So I found that online has been merciful, or finding one or two. We actually, for all of our books, really only distribute through Print and Matter, and then Miriam Gallery, which is a little farther north of us, and they're an artist book space that has exhibitions as well. And I think in getting your first book into a store, I think it's important to go to places that, it fits with your book. Your book would be at home with all of the other books there, that they all make sense. So it's kind of the same as like with library collections, is always like knowing your audience, knowing where the works you have are at home with other things. And I think I do miss going to the small stores, just because I miss talking to people about books and looking at books and geeking out over books. And that's kind of one thing that I do miss about doing that. But then the next step of doing that is doing art book fairs, where I get to geek out in a like manic frenzy of like 4 days, talking to a bunch of people and like sweating. And so I think that's another step. And if you're someone who's a little bit smaller and have a more difficult time trying to get into fairs, I found a lot of folks will team up together for tables. And that's a good way to like get your foot in the door for a fair. But we've, been doing fairs for years and years at Small Editions. And they're super special and super fun. And sometimes it helps if you have a few more copies. When I applied at the start of my artist journal, I only had one book, and so I wasn't getting into fairs anywhere. Although I did do, there's an artist collective in New York called 8 Ball that is very fun in DIY and zine and renegade, and they have really fun zine fairs, and they'll just like, it's kind of like anyone can get in. And they used to have it in this pool hall that just like the floors were really sticky and it just smelled like smoke all the time. And it was beautiful. So much fun.
Yeah, I love art book fairs, and I don't like sweating, but basically like I did a whole performance called How to Art Book Fair. That's me going in and rushing and sweating and looking at my phone and drinking, and just the whole rundown of like what it's like to table, but I'm doing it alone. So I mean, I find that art book fairs are like really the best way to like really engage with people and audiences. You never really know who you're talking to. Like I'm really sad that I wasn't in this. I'm really sad that the Seattle Art Book Fair didn't happen last year. Like I was all set. I was ready to be there. I was going to go to Walla Walla for an artist talk. Like it was all ready. And then it was like in 1 week, it was just like everything went away. So we've talked a little bit about, I mean, social media and online are kind of important, especially now. Would any of you like to talk about kind of like how you market your books? Like is there a strategy you use on social media? Is there a certain day that you post on social media? Do you do email blasts? Like what is your approach in kind of like marketing and reaching out to your community? And that's for any of you who want to answer.
I'll go first. I guess I would say, so one thing you can do for an Instagram account is to get a business account. If you don't have that, it allows you to creepily track, not individual people, but when people see things, what day people see things, the general demographics. This is like my business nerd coming out, but like you can track data about who's looking at your things, when they're looking at them, and then you can strategize when you're going to post them. And I think also like there's something to tricking the algorithm too. into the types of images that you post, and how you're tagging things. I think even just within, I wouldn't say that this is true for everything, but really for artist books and risograph books and anything like that, those hashtags are super strong. So if you actually use those, because I'll follow those hashtags and I'll learn about so many new different artist books that I hadn't known about. And so even like tagging your own work in that, I feel like will help people discover you. And having some quick accessibility to your shop, posting and like putting that link in there directly, like the less steps that people have to take to hit it and order it, the better. And I think if you're working with collaborators or different artists, like syncing up posting is great. And I think also like in having a community with other people, like I really like to hype up other like publishers who, if they're releasing new stuff, I think we all kind of do that for each other. And I think that that has been super helpful and super special. And I've found that like, I'm someone who I really hate social media. But I only keep it for small editions. And so it's been like something that can be healthy and generative. But I think I think having an online shop too is helpful for a lot of people, or even just like figuring out if that's like going into e-com is not necessarily something that you want to do for a big step, getting it into someone else's e-com shop, or like saying like, you can Venmo this, I will send you a book. Like that sort of thing I've seen work for other people too. If you're not ready to set up a web shop and things like that, to pay for a website or anything like that. But yeah.
Colleen or Sharon, did you have anything to add?
I guess I just want to say, sort of the other end of that is that I think it's totally okay and fine to not have social media and not sell books on social media. And I think that can be really successful too. So I think, it is a tool that you can use. You don't have to. There is a really rich sort of community of publishers on Instagram. And there's also a really rich literary community on Twitter. And all of that stuff is there for you. But if that's like not your thing and you like books because they're not social media, I think that's pretty cool too. A lot of the times, at least with Mount Analogue, my experience was that we sold the most books at in-person events and not online. So we always tried to make books that we were publishing a part of a community gathering, or a part of some kind of event, or a part of some kind of performance. And that was sort of our strategy. We do have social media and we use it, but sort of sparingly, as kind of almost a portfolio rather than like a buy our stuff kind of a thing. So that's also an option. And, Angel Tears, I think we have like 179 followers or something. Like we don't really engage that much with that because it's not what the project's really about. That's just not where it finds its audience. So that's also an option. And I think, small presses and artists and creative people don't need social media to sell books.
Yeah, I keep thinking about something that Sharon said in her talk, and when she was talking about intention, like that once you had the intention of creating a book and you've made it, and now you've got to get it out there. And I say that intention is really important. I really just love that as a way of thinking about it, because you really have to go out there and you have to put yourself out there and you have to sell the book. I guess the question I have in regards to that for all of you is, what has been the biggest challenge in putting your books out in the world and in some way, shape, or form? Like, what's the biggest challenge?
Well, I think for first-time authors, it's presence. It's not being seen, and so network is what I tell most of my authors. You know, you get out there and get to those different events. And I agree with Colleen when she said, so we sell more books in person as well as when we're at these different book events and different networking events is when that's where we get our most customers. Yes, social media does help us out tremendously. And I also encourage our authors to make sure that they, if they don't have an online presence, to gain one, because you just don't know who you're going to connect with. But you're going to have to put yourself out there in some way, shape, or form to network with people who you don't know, go to events that you may not think you want to be a part of, and get yourself out there to get yourself known. So presence, and is huge. It's a huge thing for first-time authors.
I also want to just jump in and say, I feel like a big challenge for me when I'm publishing books is this word that keeps sort of bouncing around. And I feel like maybe this is the word of our panel, and it came from Sharon, and it's this word intention. I think that for me, when I'm making books, because I feel like I've worked in a bunch of different, like I said, categories of ways to make books, I think that my challenge is when I'm the publisher to make sure that my vision lines up with the artist or author's vision, and that our expectations are aligned with, once the book is made, what has that book become? Does it match our visions? How are we working collaboratively as a team? Because that's going to set the intention for how we send the book off into the world. So if the book is about the process, and the book, we're printing 20 copies of it, and it's not about making money, and it's not about becoming a Twitter star, great, we did that. If the book is about selling 1,000 copies and getting on the SPD, there it is again, bestseller list, then that's what I'm going to do as the publisher. So I see, like, after the book is so endlessly fascinating to me as someone who makes books, because I think it's the part of making books that's on the publisher. It's our job. Like, we steward it into the world as it needs to go and as it needs to be. So I just, as the publisher, I'm always trying to check in with the specific book, the specific artist. Is it all lining up? And is this project doing what it needs to do? So that's, whenever I run into issues, it's when those expectations are off, and when the communication isn't there around what that project is supposed to be. Hopefully that makes sense.
Definitely. Hannah, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'd say it's similar to Colleen and Sharon, with like thinking about the intention can be the hardest part. And it's something for me that I always try to even think about before we get into like the ideation process is fun, and we can throw things around, and we're like, oh my God, what if we made this crazy box thing? But it's like, who the hell's going to buy this crazy box thing? Like, and for all of our projects too, we fund them and then split the profits with the artists. So for me too, it's like, am I going to pay out this huge chunk of money and it's not going to go anywhere? And so that I think that is the hardest part, is that first moment where you're like, okay, cool, I've spent all this money, and like, I've like estimated for, like, I think this person's going to buy it. These are my plans for it. Like, this is what the artist is doing with it. But it's always a matter of like, is it going to work? And I think a lot of times, even if you plan stuff out, it doesn't necessarily like, I think weirdly, the book that we came out with last year did much better than it would have done had we not had been in a pandemic, and people were finally like returning back to their book projects, and they're like, how the fuck do I make a book and publish it? Like if that hadn't been happening, if everyone was just like, oh cool, like bookmaking, like I don't think that book would have done that well, and I don't think it would have resonated so well as something that like, it very much spoke to like a community and people being together in book arts and like at zine fairs and doing things like that. And it was a time where everyone's like, oh my God, I missed that so much. Or like, oh, when I finally make my books, I'm so excited I can be a part of this community of people that are doing this thing. And so that's why that book was successful. But I think with everything, I try to think as much as possible before we even start making the book or deciding how many we're going to make of the book, and how we're going to treat that book. But it is always like, as soon as it comes, like it's finished and it's ready to go out and do these things, like it's always a really scary moment of being like, is this actually going to do okay? Like, is something going to change and nothing like goes well for us? But yeah, I think to build off of both what Colleen and Sharon have both said, my take. Oh,
let me unmute myself. That also makes me think about like, pricing is such a tricky thing to do. Like in the How to Art Book Fair guide, I'm like, I'm not going to tell you how to price your books. Like that's something that you have to know. But like, even having an online store, like I have to think about the price of my book, what I want people to, that I want it. So like How to Art Book Fair is $10. It's never going to be any more than that. Like sometimes I'll sell them for $5 just because like I wanted to get into someone's hand. And if they've got $5, that's cool. I'll, like I'm not in this to make $1 million. Like I want to share that book. I'm assuming with How to Book, with small editions, it's very much in that same way. But like, with you have an online store, you have not only like I use big cartels, so I pay $10 a month. And then when I give free shipping, I'm paying for not only the shipping, I'm paying for the materials to ship it in, and then I'm also losing money because the Stripe takes a cut of that money as well. So like, and people, unfortunately, Amazon's kind of ruined it for everyone because everyone wants free shipping now and they want it to be there and they want it fast. And so I guess I say all this to say, like, I'm not, how have you approached pricing the book online and how you've approached art book fairs and book fairs in general and the ways that you've sold your books? That's a question for any of you.
Hannah, do you want to go?
No, go.
Okay. I'm happy to jump in on this. And I want to kind of loop in. So in this answer, Robert in the chat is asking, can you talk more about the estimation process when developing a book in terms of setting those expectations? Is that something that comes from personal experience or something you learned from others, et cetera? And I feel like maybe these two kind of go together. So I think that also the responsibility of the publisher in this publishing process is to be fastidious in terms of money. And that is whether you're making 5 copies or whether you're making 1,000 copies. I think that in terms of pricing your books and your projects that you're coming out with, it needs to make sense. I think that opposite and a way that maybe books in this context differ from just fine art is that they have a production cost. It's not an intuitive thing. You can break down how much it costs to make something, and then you can break down how much you need to make your press continue functioning. So in terms of pricing your books, sure, there's an intuitive part. Like let's say it costs $50 to make an individual book, but you think you want to charge $200 because XYZ. But I think that really knowing what it costs to make an individual unit of your print run is really important. And that is where the detail-oriented part of publishing comes in, that I think is so nerdy and so fun. And that's where publishing differs from fine art. That is one of those areas where publishing becomes a business. And I think it's really important to emphasize that, because you're going to run into some issues if you don't keep track of that. And I'm speaking from experience because I definitely fucked up a lot in the beginning with Mount Analogue with money and stuff like that. So be fastidious in that way. I think that also, in terms of expectations and sort of Robert's question, segues into the idea of being super fastidious in terms of communication, keeping records. A lot of presses have like author questionnaires that each author fills out with specific questions. I think, you know, having a sort of, this is just what's worked for me, having a sort of formula that you can then flesh out with each individual project is what works, you know, because that starts with you setting your own expectations as a press and what your kind of vision is, and then sharing that with your different projects and authors. So I think publishers need to be detail oriented and really fastidious and really good communicators, and they need to understand that in this giant spinning wheel with all of these parts of the pie that go into making a book, their job is to manage that wheel and make it keep spinning. So it's a lot of things to juggle at once, but fastidiousness is key.
Sharon, did you or Hannah have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that well, for our company anyways, like in our initial coaching with the author, we try to get the author's expectations. You know, if they want their book done by, if you submit a book today and you want a published book by the end of the week, that's not going to happen. So we try to get their expectations and see what their needs are. But in our contract, we just give a wide range. Like we tell everyone, it's going to take anywhere from 2 months to 6 months, depending on the size of your book. We do novels, children's books, memoirs, poetry books. So a poetry book is not going to take as long as a large memoir or a large novel. So we like to sit down and have that conversation with our authors in the beginning, so those expectations aren't confused and that they're met. And so, and as far as pricing is concerned, we'll just use Amazon and go, you know, try to stay comparable with other books in that same genre. So we're not overpricing. And a lot of authors want to come and say, oh, I want my book to sell for $25. Okay, but that same genre of book will sell for like $7.99, you know. So I allow them to make the decision on pricing, but we give them a base to go by, and then we kind of coerce you to stick with what's gonna allow your book to be to sell. So yeah, most of the books that we publish range anywhere from $12.99 to $25. In the $25 range, those are normally children's books, and that's because children's books cost a lot more to make. So
yeah, I guess I can pull in from where Sharon's at, because I do something, I mean, for us, what we do, like we have the two sort of things actually for small editions, which we're probably more well known for publishing books, especially, you know, within the art book fair world, but we also, on the production end of things, is we take commission jobs from various people where I don't necessarily have the money to fund it, but I will take on a job from someone who, you know, will produce a children's book for someone. But I think and then they're kind of on their own to figure out what their pricing is. I can tell you how much it's going to be for me to make it for you. And then you can sort of figure that out on your own. But I always communicate, like, there's always a contract, just because it's better if things are written down and everyone is clear about what's happening. It's the same with, I mean, I would say it's the same even with the artists that we publish. So it's better if expectations are clear. And I think to that end too, I think pricing is like a much larger conversation that I think a lot of us in publishing want to talk about too, just because I think especially with artist books, it's like, you know, you can see this giant Taschen book that, you know, isn't like something that is like Taschen's a bad example. I take it back. But you can see an artist book that was produced by a gallery, and you know that hardcover is only $30. So why is your hardcover $60? Like I don't have, you know, where people place valuation, and I think that's like partially like, you know, large runs, like some like larger chains and things like that have put an expectation that books need to cost a certain amount, or people won't pay a certain amount over that. And I think within our publishing wing of things where we're funding this, I think we're giving really strong consideration to like all of the labor that we're putting into this. So I'm going to show you guys something like super nerdy. And this is going back to like Colleen's fastidiousness. Okay, hold on, I got the right screen. Okay, everyone see this? Okay, so I think this is also something that like, if anyone's familiar with Gender Fail, which is another press out of New York that B. Oakley runs, they and I are both like big spreadsheet people and love to talk about like how much shit costs. And like B is making a living like entirely off of the press, where like I'm taking in work from other people, and the money that I make from that I use to fund these projects. So when I do any publishing project, I like to talk to the artists about like what the expectations are, like if we went like big crazy dreams and then like something smaller, and then like where we want this project to sit within it. So I really try to give a lot of value to the concept and then make it work. So even with like Ginny's project that is an $1,800 clamshell box, like I was like, no, we're gonna make this work. We're gonna price this in a way and like find materials and make it in a way that this is going to work, because I don't think we need to compromise this idea. So if I'm starting with Sam's book, like I'm making a whole item detail spreadsheet with the cover paper we want, how much we need, how much it's gonna cost, how much shipping is gonna be, and how much that each of those things ends up costing per book for our total material cost per book. And then I bring that into a main budget. So then I bring all of those materials that are pulled over, like for nerds, the reference will like go over to the other tab. But then I'll bring all of those materials in. So making sure I'm accounting for all of these things, especially also as I'm making the books and putting them together. So I know that my material expenses are $700 for this book. Then like my printing time, like how many hours I'm putting into that. How long I'm like, just how long I'm collating pages, because if you're reso printing, it can be a bitch sometimes. Like how long it's going to take to sew, like how much it's going to cost to pay someone to sew these books together, how much it's going to cost to do this. Like Sam had to pay to rent like the darkroom out to make the silver gelatin prints, how much his time is worth to him. And so then we put those into the production expenses. Then we're looking at material costs, production costs, how big our edition size is, what our cost per book is. And then this retail calculation is if I was to charge it like 2.5 times how much it costs to make it, 3.5 or 3 times and 3.5 times. And so we ended up settling on $100 because Sam knows that the value of a silver gelatin print alone can sell for $100. And sometimes it is a hard sell. Like it honestly, this book has been a harder book to sell because it's $100 and like it sets within an art book, you know, within other art books at a store. And it seems like for some people it's a lot, but for other people like who understand the value of what this project is, it makes total sense. And honestly, it's like a steal for a lot of people. But yeah, that's my like nerd tangent about like how many we need to sell, how many like I'm making off of this, how much like Sam is making and that like Sam got paid out for, like if he gets extra books from that. So yeah, that's just like my tangent into how I price artist books.
Well, I love that you brought a spreadsheet. There can't be, I think all of these panels have had a spreadsheet of some kind appear on the screen. I think Robert's like has appeared. And you know, it's funny because I've never actually calculated the hours that I spent printing a book, but I do talk about in How to Art Book Fair, the fact that we don't count for if you're doing the Print and Matter Art Book Fair, that's 4 days and it's 8 to 10 hours on some of those days. And that's time as well that I would put on the spreadsheet. If you're, maybe it's just too much, it's like it goes into another realm. But like, you know, there's a lot of that cost that we're not thinking about of all of our, really our personal time and how, you know, whether we're going to bookstores and introducing ourselves, whether we're going to, you know, literary events and introducing ourselves to other authors. You know, I'm not that, I do have a lot of spreadsheets, but I'm not that exact in my time. You know, for me, it's a labor of love that is usually, I went to an artist panel a few years ago and it was about artist-run spaces. And one of the people said, you're at an, why you do an artist-run space is not why, but the return is love from artists, basically, love from people who purchase what you're doing and they love it and they talk about it and they share their story with it about it. Like that's why we kind of do this, that someone takes this object and like wants to hold it and it means a lot to them. I think we're kind of getting close to kind of the audience Q&A time, but Tom had mentioned that Jacqueline Diaz had kind of asked a question in her panel of what was the earliest book that you can remember encountering? And so I want to kind of ask that as kind of a wrap up before we do some Q&As of what was the earliest book that you can remember encountering and having an emotional connection to in some way?
I'm happy to jump in if that's okay. So many books are flashing through my mind, but the one that really sticks out to me just because of the physical experience of holding it and looking at it and how it looked as an object was In the Night Kitchen. Does anyone remember that book where the kid's like naked the whole time, but he's having a dream and the illustrations are so beautiful, and just the Maurice Sendak, exactly. And the feeling and the tone of the book is so tight. It's so well crafted in every aspect of it. And I think about that book a lot even now, especially when I'm working with comics artists and illustration artists and how to best present the tone of what they're working on besides just it on a page. That book is like crazy beautiful. For me, that's what it is. Maurice, you can't go wrong with him. He's always good.
Sharon or Hannah, would you like to share?
For me, anything by Terry McMillan. I mean, that's how I grew up. So just being inspired to see someone with my skin color writing books and really being able to articulate and share my narrative and experience in a positive light that's more moving than I can ever possibly get. So yeah.
All right, mine is kind of an odd one, but it's this I can't remember if it was some European adaptation of this book, but it was a book called 365 Goodnight Stories. And I really engaged with the illustrations, but I think the biggest thing was how a book could sort of give, it was supposed to be snippets of different stories that were stretched out over every night of a calendar year. And so I think I liked the sort of the book dictating how I interpreted the piece. And I think that was some of the first things that influenced what an artist book could be and how it speaks to you and how it speaks to you as a child. But yeah, that's probably, it's a really random one, but it's probably the first one that I loved. I still love that book. And I would read it over and over and over and over again every year. And so I would return back to it for years and return back to the same stories, but I wouldn't let myself skip ahead. So yeah, that's my book.
Great. Thank you all for sharing and thank you all for all of your advice. So I want to kind of open it up to people watching on the Zoom. Do you have any questions specifically for Colleen, Sharon, or Hannah? And feel free to go ahead and post it into the comments. That would be great. I'll go ahead and share. I can't think of when my first encounter with the book was, but I do want to say that I'm one of those people that tends to carry books around with me everywhere, and that I like to look at it over there, whether I'm reading it or not. There's a lot of books I haven't read, but I'm I can't give away. I don't want it. I want to keep them near me, or there's something about the visual of the cover or what the book represents that I want to carry around with me a lot of times. I've read a lot of books too, but sometimes there's just certain books you want to carry around. Let's see. Are there any questions? Let's see. So there's a question here. It says, do you hire freelance editors or do you have in-house? So I'm not sure if that's specific to who that's specific to. Maybe Sharon.
Yeah, we have in-house editors.
Yeah.
Although we've hired, I mean, a couple of them were freelance at the time, but you know, now they're in-house. Yeah.
I would also ask, like, Hannah, Colleen, when you're working on a project, do you hire specific editors for specific books you're doing, or is it more just one-on-one with you and the artist?
I'll jump on that one. So I don't necessarily, a lot of the book projects, so when we sort of build things out as commissioned work, it'll be like, you can show up to me with like a fully done PDF and you're just like, I need to pick papers, like pick a binding style, figure out materials that are work, and like, I just want you to make this book. Or we've also had people come to us with like, there's someone who's like, I want to say there's more than 400 drawings of Finnish elves. I've been working on a Finnish elf cookbook, which is one of my favorite projects outside of like art books. So this client brought like 400 elf drawings and wants to put them into a book and has like a giant stack of like typed out recipes that she's printed. And so we worked with her to, you know, design it, put the elves in their rightful places, and then like copy edit all of that. So all of those people are brought in-house, or a lot of times what I find is people who are coming to me as clients are people who've selected, I guess my thing would probably be more designers than editors, just because I'm like, our even commission work is really concentrated in art books and work for galleries, work for other designers for fashion houses. And so, yeah, we'll either work with someone who is a chosen designer from whoever our client is, and work through the files that they prepared, or we'll do it with our in-house designer.
That's great. So it looks like, I think, yeah, so Robert Baxter has a question. This festival is organized chronologically, 1 before, 2 making, 3 after. Do you want to confuse that at all? What point in the process does after a book begin, or does making a book ever happen before you actually have the manuscript, idea, et cetera, developed?
Yes. I think it's really fun to think that books happen chronologically, but in my experience, the process can be quite messy. But I think, you know, speaking to all of these things we've been talking about, like intention, expectations, what we're really talking about in this after the book session is before a book. After the book and before the book are inextricably tied. They're two sides of the same coin. When you start with the book, you're thinking about the end, and that's part of your job as the publisher. I think, again, just like bring it back to that, like what the publisher brings to the table is that skill set. So being able to envision an end product and work backwards. So I think working backwards on book projects is the actual chronology or whatever the case might be. And then what happens when you get into phase 2 and making the book is whatever you set up in the beginning might change, and that's fine, but at least you have that end point that you started with. So I think that they're all jumbled up, and actually in making a book, depending on what the production is like, it might be the case that you cycle through all 3 of those a few times. And I think that can be really fun. For me, that's the fun. I'm like, yeah, let's get a little messy in a fastidious way. But yeah, I love that question. That's very true.
Hannah or Sharon, did you have anything else to add?
Well, Colleen's she hit it right on the head. I mean, it's messy work. A lot of people that want to write books or have written books, they want everything that, not everyone, but people want things done. They have an expectation. They want this and that. But anybody who knows, when you're publishing a book, with all the details and with all the idea changes, and sometimes it's from the author and then sometimes it's from the editor, there's a lot of back and forth that can go on, and a lot of times authors aren't ready or prepared to do that. Like I said, in the beginning, they just want to hand the baby over and say, make me a baby, hey, here's the seat, make me a baby, and make it pretty. But we need input along the way throughout the entire process, from the beginning to the end. At least we want to stay in contact with our author, because what happens if we don't, you give us your book baby, your idea, and we just do what we do, and then we give you a product back and you're like, well, no, I wanted this or I wanted that, then we have a whole problem. So I think staying in contact, staying in touch, keeping those lines of communications open via email, however you choose to do it, is important to make sure that everyone is on the same path, the same track, and to get that book out there. But yeah, it's not gonna be a just straight shot. We're gonna go through the valleys and the streams and take a walk down the river too.
Yeah, I'd almost say in my own case, like it's a book really begins for me when I start talking about it, like when I'm ready to share it with someone that I'm going to do this. And now, and since I'm not talking to as many people on my daily basis with the pandemic, I feel like it's much more of a like, oh, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to make this. I'm going to look for paper now. Like, how am I making this? How am I going to do this? I never really, I know it's funny that I'm running the After a Book, but I never really think about what to do after a book. I'm just like, okay, I mean, really the impetus for me often is art book fairs. Like that's a deadline goal that gives me, or maybe some kind of book fair where I'm like, okay, got to get a new book ready to go. And in some ways that's great, but during the pandemic, that hasn't worked as well for me. Like I did the print virtual art book fair and I released 2 books, and that was the dumb way to do it for me. Like I should have announced it like a month ahead of time and like put the book out there, because it was just drowned out in like every other book, So, it's better planning, a better spreadsheet of what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it would have been better. But I mean, I think a lot of what, making books is trial and error, especially for the beginners out there. It's just like, make a book, find it, get it together. Big Cartel's free, I think, for like 5 items, like put it on there, try and sell it, like do whatever you want to do what you can do to kind of get it out there. What do you, I should ask Colleen, Hannah, and Sharon, do you have questions for each other that we haven't addressed? Not to put you all on the spot, but.
I'm really curious what it's been like for you guys this past year, and how you've handled everything, and like what your next big thing is. Like what are you so excited to talk about that's coming next in our like post-traumatic stress disorder years that are coming? But yeah, how has this past year been for you, and what's exciting next that you want to share?
Well, I guess I'll start. This past year has been crazy. So like when COVID first hit, I think business kind of grinded down for exactly 2 months. And then after that, once everyone figured out that, hey, we're not going anywhere, we're not doing anything, we just blew up. Like we were so busy. I didn't know how to hold my head on. So it was kind of good that we were sheltered in place, because I needed to be in place to handle and manage and make sure everyone got the right books, got the right editors and stuff like that. And I think that's the that was our busiest time in 5 years, was during COVID. And that makes sense because everyone else had to sit down and go within themselves. And, oh, now I've always been wanting to write this book, so let me get this done. So it's been quite interesting. Like before, I knew when our slow periods were going to be, when our peak seasons were, and that this whole last year has just been, none of those have matched any of the prior 4.5 years. So you get it, right? Okay, good. Because I was like, what's happening here? But I'm just really excited about just all the new books that are coming out from, because people are still writing from COVID. And so we're right back where we were last year, being slammed again. And so it's a good slam though. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say my experience was very similar to Sharon's, where like I had a couple projects and like I was grinding to like have some launches for like clients for art openings that was like supposed to be March 28th, and then we're like, okay, there's no opening and there's going to be 1,500 books, and so they sat in my studio for 3 months. But it was complete radio silence for like 2 months, and then it was crazy. And I took over Small Editions at the very end of 2019. Yeah, it was cool. Yeah. It was awesome. And I had to move the studio, and if you don't know anything about bookbinding equipment, it's really heavy. It's like I had to move multiple 500-pound pieces of equipment. Luckily my Riza's on wheels, but like everything else was really nuts. So we moved a studio at the end of January, like we're feeling good, got things started, and then the pandemic happened. And since then, yeah, I've been so slammed, and I don't think I've had a experience similar to other people where they've had time off to do things and think. I've just sort of been working a lot. But I don't mind it. I'm happy for it. I'm excited that there's almost like sort of a renaissance of like book and book form, and people were like, oh, we can't touch each other to see each other, and we can hold these things and we can send things to each other, and this is so exciting, and I love that. And so that's been really awesome. The only thing is like I can't take as many projects as I want to, just because I don't have as much capacity. I think it went from like me doing everything by myself, then things being crazy, then me bringing someone else on, and then even then just still not even being able to have the capacity. And then I think the other thing that's been kind of bonky is that production was going fine, like as far as like paper suppliers, like bookbinding, stuff like that. When we manage like larger jobs, we'll be, working with other trade binderies and things like that. And material costs have gone up like something crazy. Then like something stupid will happen with a paper supplier. And this started in like January. So everything was going fine. We were super busy, chugging along, lots of jobs. And now we still have lots of that. And people are like, the other thing, people expect stuff a lot faster than they did before the pandemic. And I think it's just because everyone was ordering things to their house. Like, I don't know what it is, but people are like, yeah, so I have this thing. I haven't started designing it yet. Can I have that in 4 weeks? And I'm like, I physically could not do it any faster than that, like if I tried. And I'm like, oh, cool. And also that paper you were looking for. Yeah, the mill doesn't make that anymore. Oh, and the mill went under. Yeah, so that's not going to happen. So that's like weird, fun things that have developed throughout this time. But something that I am excited for is being able to do in-person things with people. We never got to have it. We were about to have a studio warming party. Like I moved into this big, crazy studio and painted it like fun colors and was like, oh, we can do like fun book workshops and like bring lots of people in and do these things. And so I haven't been able to do that. And it was just me and my dog for like a year. And like one of the bookbinders, and we'd like alternate days so that she could be in there working while I wasn't in here, so that like no one was going to get exposed to anything. So I'm excited for that. And I'm excited to travel and like see people again and exchange ideas and like feel and look at books again. And I think that's like the best part of it. But yeah. What about Colleen? What about you? What's it?
COVID happened at a really interesting time for me personally in terms of what I was doing with press stuff and publishing. it came at a time when I was already reevaluating what my project looks like. So for me, the big change with COVID was not, I wasn't in the middle of anything big or anything like that. The big change was in the content and like how I was taking on projects and like what kinds of things I wanted to focus on. And so that just ended up looking like, wow, I have low capacity, but I think that publishing is extremely important right now. And I have that skill, so I should use that to make my community, I don't know, alive. I don't know, like what I can do, this is what I can do, you know? So that's why I was like back to basics with Mount Analogue. We're publishing zines and weird 100, editions of these like political pamphlets, and we're donating all the money. And that's what that looked like, And then also because of COVID, Angel Tears started as a way to honestly make all of the screen time I was logging productive. Like all of the things that I'm consuming, actually, what does that look like if you put a critical lens on it and try to take that out of context and like re-narrativize it? So it was productive for me in that way. Like, I sort of realigned myself with like the art of publishing and like got away from the other things. So that was really fun. But similar to both of you, I can't wait, and everyone, I can't wait to like hug my friends at an art book fair and be like, hey, I'm handing you this book. We're both touching it at the same time, can't wait. So yay. I think the first art book fairs after this are going to be bangers. One's for the books.
So I noticed another question pop up in the feed. Speaking of edition sizes, for hand-produced books, or more generally ones where there's not a print on-demand option, do you have an edition size that you gravitate towards as a default, or rules of thumb you internally have for edition sizes for specific types of books?
So for poetry books, smaller books, we use 5x8. Memoirs, novels, novellas, 6x9s, and then bigger sizes. Sizes for children's book vary. It just depends on who we're working with and what their vision is. So 5x8, 6x9s for print on demand books.
How many are you usually printing at one time?
How many books do we print at one time?
Yeah, like is there for the books that you're doing for for a children's book, like how many do you print usually for like a first edition run?
Oh, well, it depends on the author. Generally 50 to 100, just depends. Yeah. We totally leave that up to the author with it. We don't bind books or do anything like that. We have Amazon print them, or we use independent printing companies. We have a couple that we use because some people will not use Amazon they just won't. So some people want us to just publish it, format it, and then get it printed through an independent printing company, and then they'll sell it on their own websites or something like that.
Hannah, how about small editions?
Yeah, so I always have this, so basically with bookbinding, if you're doing hand binding or anything larger like that, like book production cost is like all concentrated in the setup. So for example, if I'm doing like a foil stamp on a cover, for me to do that, it's gonna cost like, generally it's like about $100 of someone's labor to do that, to set up a stamp. And then like somewhere around $75 to make the stamp, the physical magnesium stamp. It's like $20 for the foil. So all of those things as like a custom design house. So you're looking at like, I didn't add up all my math, but like we're looking at like $150, $200 for like a foil stamp. If you're doing one book, now your single book, like I've made single books for clients that are over $3,000, that are like leather, like there's one book I did that had like 16 foil stamps. And so, you know, you'll have something that is really expensive for the setup, but if I was to do that same single book in an edition of 100, that foils, that like cost stays the same, but then you've stretched it out over an edition size of, you know, 100 books. So something, you know, I'll tell people where like one single like hardcover book that's hand sewn, like I can sew one book in a day, like the setup I need to do that, or I can sew 10 books in a day and your cost is stretched out over that. So when I advise people to think about their edition size, like having the knowledge that like, are you trying to hit like a per book cost in order to get that into a store? And then also thinking about like, this goes back to like your end of after a book is like, how many people do you want to give this book away to? Firstly, like write a list of all your friends, family, lovers, like who do you want to like, or just like you want to give it out to for free to like, you know, like you'll have to send in, if it's a photo book, you're sending it into Aperture to try to get it like for a photo book price. So like think about all of those things that like, those need to be like costs that you give out, and then think about, you know, how much you'd want to distribute in different places and like how much you want to have left over. Because I think a lot of people will make a smaller run of books, and I mean, this is a little bit different than like a print on demand model where like all of it is like one setup cost. Like it's not going to get cheaper if you do it again. And so I do like, I keep that same thing in mind for all of the books that we make too. And I would say like, to speak to Amelia's question, we personally will gravitate towards like, if it's not one of the like really insane bookworks that we do, that's like gonna be in the like $1,000 range, like above, we generally gravitate towards 100, because it's like, you know, you can split that with the artist, or like there's a good like handful to give out if it's not something that's going to go really fast. I guess with How to Book, I really didn't think that book was going to do that well personally. I was like, yeah, this is a book that I feel really good about. I really love this book. I think this is super important, but like, I don't know, 100 should be fine. And then my co-publisher was like, I don't know, like maybe we'll want some more. And we've used the sales of all of that to donate to different causes. And we use that to then pay all of our contributors as well. And we had like 17 contributors. And I was like, I think it's really important that people are paid for like the time that they spent doing this. So that enabled me, you know, like the production costs of those books, like making it 500. I also don't care if I sit on those books for a couple years, because I realized too that it's sort of trickling. It's trickling out into the world, and certain people, like someone's friend bought it and then they're hearing about it from another friend. And so then having it out in the market longer allows it to be held by more people. And I say that to other people who are selling books. I'm like, do you want it to be gone? Do you want it to be gone in 3 months and you'll feel really bad about it and have to make it again? Or do you want to like sit on it for a little bit? So yeah, our like personal one will like sit around 100, but like some people who have maybe like a larger following, I'll say like you should probably be closer to like 500 to 1,000. And especially if you want to do something that's in like offset printing, if you want to get up to that point, that's like a whole nother, I'm always happy to talk about that pricing, but like the pricing of like print methods and binding methods and things like that, like they'll become more attainable as you go up in edition size. But yeah.
Colleen, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I have a very similar approach to Hannah. We start with around 100, and it's based on what the goals are for the book, kind of like we talked about earlier. I would say though, I've never done a print run larger than 300. After that 300, I just say it's sold out. And people, that's for me, because that's how I work. I'm ready to move on to the next project or whatever the case might be. So that happens because we're publishing, we have a certain budget and I want to publish a certain amount of projects. So it all goes back to that spreadsheet, really.
Well, great. I think we're kind of like near the kind of end of our time here. Was there any final thoughts that any of you wanted to end with, or were there any final questions before we wrapped up? I think we're good then. I think I have to thank all of you for, all of your thoughtful advice and feedback and sharing your books. I'm really excited to go look at your websites a little bit deeper now and be like, oh, what am I going to buy? And I encourage everyone who is, it looks like Hannah's already had a book sale, so that's good. I also want to thank Tom and Jamie for organizing this, for having us. I know that there's a whole bunch more going on this weekend, so I'll pass it off to you two.
Yeah, thank you everybody so much for joining this panel. It's been so interesting to hear everyone's perspective from different corners of the publishing and distribution and printing and art book worlds. Yeah, so as Paul mentioned, we do have a lot more activities tomorrow. I'm going to see if I can bring up a slide real quick that shows what's on the itinerary. Jamie, did you have anything while I figure that out?
No, I've just put the link in the chat for those who just want to visit our website. But yeah, this has been really fantastic. I have so many notes. I have so many links that I need to dig into. Such great advice. Thank you all so much for being here, Paul, Colleen, Sharon, and Hannah. This has been really, really terrific. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Here's tomorrow's lineup. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. is Push Pull, which is a small art space and gallery in Ballard, Seattle. They'll be doing a studio visit and sharing some of the works that they produce there and print and publish as well. And then at 11 a.m. is Mark Wand Editions and Paper Hammer Studios, where they'll be sharing some of the artist books that they've produced and showing what they do with their studios out in Tieton, Washington. At noon is Partners in Print, which is the School of Visual Concepts letterpress program that's been kind of reformed as a new entity, and it's interesting to hear how they approach that. And then at 1 o'clock is Cornish College of the Arts. They'll be sharing about their book arts program and some of the things they produce there. At 2 is a workshop with Anemone and Rieselgeist, which I'm sure I'm still mispronouncing, but that's going to be a lot of fun, where you can learn how to make your own risograph book or zine project and ask them all about that process. And then at 4 o'clock, Knox Gardner is going to join Jamie and I to just chat about anything that we're up to, and we can answer questions and just kind of talk about books during office hours. And he is the publisher at Entre Rios Books, also here in Seattle, which publishes a lot of poetry books and small press editions as well. So thank you again, everybody, and have great weekends.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.